Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. There are times in our life where we cannot help, even if we're not singers, where we just have that sense of joy and newness and thanksgiving, and it just causes something in us to burst forth in just sort of a joy that radiates. I was at a conference this week in Denver, and on the way back, I was flying, and I sat next to a young couple, and they had an adorable little 5-month-old whose name was Zoe. And Zoe had these big blue eyes, and she had this, onesie that was a little red onesie, a little pink heart, and she was just so cute. But what was also precious was the way in which she would grab at her dad's beard in a way that he would not have allowed any other human to touch his face, but he was so proud of his little 5-month-old child. And to see the love in this couple, and it was clear that they were singing a new song in life. And I think that song certainly had elements of anxiety, like we don't want to mess this up, right? A typical song of new parents. But also a song of great joy in this new life and new love that they were experiencing. Again, there are times and seasons and moments in our life where we are filled with a new song that we cannot help but break forth in. However, there are times in life where we want to sing a new song, where we feel like we ought to be singing a new song, but a new song is not forming in our hearts. We can't do it. I remember once this woman came into my office, and she was very sad and kind of distraught. And she looked at me and she said, "Pastor, what's wrong with me?" And I said, "Well, how many months ago did your husband die?" We did the math, it was 6 months, and I said, "Well, it sounds to me like you're right on schedule then." This was a person who had given a lot of care as their husband had died, and so the initial death, I think the reaction was one of relief that his suffering was over, and that shielded her, I think, from some of the grief. But as time wore on and holidays and birthdays happened, that grief became so heavy. She wanted to sing a new song, but she wasn't quite able to yet. This can happen for all sorts of reasons. I know in the next couple weeks there'll be kids that are coming home from college, and in college it's supposed to be this great time of life when you're singing a new song, but especially that first year, that's not always the case. Yesterday I went to Wise grocery store, and as I finished shopping, I really wanted to find a human, because I find that I'm faster when I have a human to help me check out. But I looked around and I saw that there were only self-service kiosks. I realized this was one of those changes that happened during the pandemic that wasn't going to go back the other way. And I said, "Oh, there's a new normal. I'm supposed to be singing a new song, but I didn't feel it. I wanted my human at the counter to scan my groceries." Again, for all sorts of reasons in our life, we can find ourselves in a season of grieving what was and not quite able yet to live into the new, where we want desperately to sing a new song, but we're not quite there yet. I know we've all been there at various points in our lives. But the Lord today commands us, invites us, sing a new song to the Lord. And it turns out that our God is in the resurrection business. Our God is in the business of giving us a new song. Some of you may be familiar with what are sometimes called the stages of grief. That so often people who are grieving kind of go through a similar set of emotions. And they sort of have named 5 of them: denial, bargaining, anger, sadness, and acceptance. And again, maybe you're familiar with those, either conceptually or as I talk about them, how you have walked those feelings. But they've recently been talking about a 6th stage of grief. And what they've talked about is that there's a stage of grief called meaning making. And meaning making is when we are less concerned about coming to terms with the past and become open and start living into a new future. Again, meaning making is the stage where it's less about accepting what has happened, and it becomes more about, okay, what is the new way forward? When my grandfather died, everybody in the family was, sad, especially my grandmother, who now sort of had to recalibrate her life without a spouse. And this was a very hard time for her, especially the first year. But about a year later, she did two things that were different. And the first is that she invited all of the family on a big vacation together. And the second thing that she did was that she started volunteering at her church's thrift store. Again, this wasn't so much at that point about how do I accept the death, grieve it, but this was a different way of grieving, of saying, okay, now I'm ready to take another step and to move forward in life. She was ready to sing a new song. The Lord had put a new song in her heart. Again, I think we find ourselves hungry for singing a new song. And today the writer of the psalm, we don't know who this was, so I'll call it the psalmist. The psalmist, I think, gives us some instruction, points us in the direction of how we might learn how to sing a new song. And it's kind of counterintuitive, because what the psalmist says is sing a new song to the Lord, and then right after that, the psalmist begins to talk about the past. Right? The psalmist says sing a new song, but the very next thing the psalmist does is the psalmist reflects on the past. And it turns out that to move forward, to make meaning again, to sing a new song, we have to often turn back. And this is true for all of the work we do around grief. There's always a way in which we have to look back. So for instance, if a relationship or a marriage fell apart, we need to go back and figure out what happened, what we need to confess, what we need to forgive. If we've been through some sort of trauma, like we have PTSD, again, go back and learn how to reframe and kind of be able to be in those memories without getting anxious. Again and again, we discover that we often have to go back. And again, sometimes if we've had an illness, we do have to have those days of why and lament. Or sometimes as we think about the past, we begin to ask ourselves, okay, what memories do I want to cherish? And how might I honor and cherish those memories? Again, there's plenty of work with grief that has to do with the past. But it turns out that making meaning and singing a new song is also about the past. Right? God does not say learn a new alphabet, learn a new language. It's learn a new song, somehow put together what you knew in a new way. So in the case of my grandmother, my grandfather and grandmother were people for whom family was really important. And after my grandfather died, my grandmother then wanted to say a year later, hey family, you're still important to me. And even though Grandpa has died, we can still make new memories together. It was a way of, again, and almost honoring my grandfather to say the family is still important, but it was a way of singing a new song with it. My grandmother and grandfather also had started going to this small sort of New England congregational church later in life. And this was very meaningful for them to, later in life, rediscover church together. But now that my grandfather wasn't there anymore, it was different for my grandmother to sit in the pews. Right? She needed to find something new, and so she began to volunteer in a way that she couldn't when my grandmother was sick and my grandfather was sick and she had to take care of him. Again, it was something related, faith in her church, but it was in a new way, singing a new song. Again, we find that the way forward is by looking back. But when we're thinking about making meaning and singing a new song, it's a different question. It's not a question of what have I done wrong, Or what am I so frustrated about? Or what even do I want to celebrate? Those are all good questions, but the question at this point becomes, of the things in my past, what is God calling me to bring forward into the next chapter? And that's the question we start to ask. That's the question the psalmist invites us to ask. Of the things that happened in my past, who I was, what does God want me to bring forward into the next chapter? Now this, of course, all sounds really good and really wonderful. But I want to even go a little bit further and say there's actually another question that the psalmist recommends that we ask. And the second half of the psalm is no longer really about the one singing. The second half of the psalm, the psalmist keeps talking about other people, other nations, other tribes. The psalmist is talking about the trees and the mountains and the hills and the rivers. The psalmist is talking about God. In other words, the psalmist has had his or her vision lifted from the past, lifted from the self, and now is focused on others. And as we think about moving ahead and singing a new song, again and again it comes back to that question that we're called to answer as Christians. Who is my neighbor? How does my neighbor need my help at this time? And when we start asking those two questions together, what is God calling me to bring forward? And who is my neighbor and how can I help? That's where we start to find new meaning. That's where we start to find and are able to sing a new song. Again, this is really hard. And the truth is that it's more than we can do on our own. But the good news is that God is in the resurrection business. God is in the business of putting a new song in our heart. Right? This is what Jesus has done. Jesus chooses to sing a new song even after his own death. Again, our God is in the business of singing a new song and raising us up that we can sing a new song. One of the most powerful ways I've seen this singing a new song is when I've walked with people through hospice. And sometimes people invite hospice in at the very, very end when it's simply palliative care, almost right before a morphine drip starts. But there are other times when hospice is invited in earlier. And at this point, again, hospice is about saying, I accept that the disease will win over my body, but I somehow still want to live. And I've seen people in that time of hospice begin to ask the question of, in this chapter, even in this short chapter, what do I want to carry with me from the past? What is important? And who are the people that I love? Whom can I still help? And then we find there some beautiful new songs and some beautiful meaning made as I've seen people begin to share at those times some of their core memories, their values, their faith. And what happens in those times is that suddenly instead of dying, the person is living. And yes, there are tears, but there is also laughter in the faith of death. And yes, there's fear, but there's faith that's overwhelming in God's faithfulness for us. You see, again, our God is in the business of resurrection. Our God is in the business of singing and singing in us a new song. And so what happens is that as we go through life again and again, things don't work out. Find ourselves grieving, but then the Lord teaches us a new song. The Lord helps us pull the good from the past and open our hearts to service in the future. And so again and again, we're singing a new song over and over in our life. Until finally we get to that point. Last Sunday on All Saints, I talked about how the saints are in heaven now singing the new song. And one day, you see, we'll take our place and we'll join them and we'll look around and there'll be, again, the people from all the nations of the earth. And there'll be all of creation and the trees and the mountains, and there'll be this glorious new song. And you see, at that time, what's going to happen is that we're going to say, this is a new song. But it's a song of resurrection, and I know how to sing a song of resurrection because again and again in my life, Jesus taught me how to sing that song. Jesus raised me up to new life. And we'll realize that even if then it's a strange and new song, we'll know again that the one, Jesus, the one who was crucified and risen, who has sung the new song first, is there teaching us once again to sing the new and now eternal song. Amen.
Amen.